which we're a part of, is dedicated to, okay, great. The International Trade Administration is dedicated to enhancing the competitiveness of the U.S. industry, expanding market access, and increasing exports, meaning increasing your business growth. We want to bring more money into the U.S. so companies and citizens can get richer and jobs can be supported. The U.S. Commercial Service has a global network of trade professionals in over 106 domestic offices across the United States and in all territories. And internationally, we work through the U.S. embassies and consulates where we have offices, or we have corresponding offices with our State Department econ staff. They are all there to serve you and to help your various business interests. I invite you to set up a meeting with your local international trade specialist if you're not in Houston to discuss your company's goals overseas and how the U.S. Commercial Service may help to assist you. Our mission is to help U.S. companies export by providing trade counseling, research, market intelligence, solving trade disputes, including customs and logistics when possible, with foreign governments, and to assist with finding qualified representatives and distributors overseas. We vet companies and partners outside the U.S. to help protect U.S. companies through due diligence reports. We do direct discussions in our investigations with potential partners for your protection. We also help solve issues that arise, as I mentioned, such as logistic questions. We partner with around 18 other U.S. government agencies involved in export, from the Office of Foreign Asset Control, or OFAC, also known as the Sanctions Office at the U.S. Department of Treasury, to the Bureau of Industry and Security, or BIS, in the Department of Commerce, a sister agency that provides export licensing and is the first round if you're applying for an export license before you would go to, say, ITAR or State Department or somewhere else. And the U.S. Customs Bureau, which is relevant to this conversation today because they have the Schedule B search engine. Outside the U.S., it's still the HS code. In the U.S., it's Census Bureau. It's still called the Schedule B search engine instead of the HS code search engine for historical reasons. With any of these organizations I've just mentioned, OFAC, BIS, and Census, I just want to remind you that you have two options. One is self-determination for licenses or HS codes, and the other is to ask for official written rulings on that. They take longer, and naturally a lot of the people in those organizations, I always recommend self-determination first. And in that process, please feel free to counsel with us wherever your nearest commercial service office is in the United States. We will be glad to give you some spoken advice, although not a written ruling, and try to help determine or try to help see if we can focus your resources on the right solution so you can either get the self-determination or apply for an export license or HS code, etc. So today we're going to hear from some experts in the field. Our host today, Maura, has been gracious enough to host this and use their technology while we've had, I've had some technical difficulties in getting our MS Teams to work. And thus they will be speaking last on ATA Carnet, or temporary imports. In over 20 years, I find this to be underutilized, and of course I think it's preferable. I'm not giving any recommendations here, but I just think that it's preferable to some of the duty drawbacks, which is more difficult since you need the drawback through the customs, and hopefully they can compare some other options as well. So if you look towards your bottom of the screen, you'll see the question and answer. Excuse me. Hopefully you'll be able to type your questions in as we're speaking. And we can then answer them either as we go along or towards the end. Our first speakers are with SOS, and they are a logistics company that is very seasoned and understanding and providing what is called a white glove solution to deal with shippers. So it's important to note that a lot of people do call and say, can I just get on a ship? Can I get my cargo on a ship? And I often refer to them to freight forwarders. So that's why I look to get a specialty company today to discuss, you know, more of your freight going, ocean going freight. And previously we had a conference with Carnet, and that was more geared towards the what I would say lighter package exports via UPS, FedEx, and DHL. But this one, although air is a possibility, hopefully they can discuss some cargo more. Excuse me, I have a little bit of cough, so I think it's best I just turn it over to Brandon there at SOS maybe, and he can do the introductions for himself and his colleague, Stephen, that are joining us from SOS, and give a little background on what they have, and then begin to talk about some of the key areas of export VAT, HS codes, customs processes, and even the state of, you know, maybe just make a brief comment. I know I get a lot of questions about the issues with supply chain that have been cropping up during the pandemic, and the shortages, I think, are very well known to all of us who tried to buy something, but especially to most of you on the call, probably all of you on the call who are aware of some of the current supply chain issues. So if you would, you know, like to begin that, please feel free to start that conversation now, and you know, maybe you can tell us how you would, Stephen, how you would like to have questions answered along the way, or either after you're done speaking. I know we're ending at 11, but we also have a segment open from 11 to 11:15 for those who want to stay on and join us for a question and answer period where we can get into better discussions.
Well, thank you, Brandon.
I'd like to turn it over to you right now. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon. My name is Brandon Bowles, SOS Global. I've got about 25 years experience in logistics. I think we're going to start off the conversations with Steve Gruning, our Senior Vice President. He's going to give a little bit of feedback about who we are, what we do in the industry, and then he'll turn it back over to me to kind of start talking about, for new shippers, building blocks, which I don't think we have a lot of new shippers on the call, but we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the current state of logistics around the world, some advantages that we may be able to find for you if you're exporting from the States. And then we'll finish off talking a little bit about ATA Carnets and our experiences with moving temporary imports and exports. So Steve, if you'd like to jump on.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. This is Steve Gruning again here from SOS Global Express here locally in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I thought what I would do just briefly is give a little bit about my background and how I came to SOS. I don't have the strongest career compass. I'm a chemical engineer that went into racing and moved over to IndyCar here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And the only reason why I bring it up is it's just interesting how I find myself now going on my 8th year with SOS. We, from an IndyCar series standpoint, we decided that we need to expand internationally as the domestic market was fairly saturated with NASCAR, NHRA, and the rest. And so we picked a few international markets, one of those being Brazil and specifically Sao Paulo. And now we had some of the more consumer-facing brands like a FedEx, DHL, whether it's was with the series or DHL was with Andretti. And we looked to a couple of these folks to help move the series. And we just found out and realized really quickly that we were talking to the wrong folks. And so I stretched out, not knowing anything in regards to how to move, 30 plus cars, fuel, tires, millions and millions of dollars of equipment, not to mention a on-air broadcast on a major news network across the globe, and was fortunate enough to be turned on to SOS and pick them as a partner for the series, and they successfully moved our equipment, all of our equipment, internationally and successfully and within budget, and all those things you want to hear from from a series standpoint. Did a fantastic job, and I made the jump almost 8 years ago now here, and have been working ever since, just trying to expand the portfolio. From a legacy standpoint, we've been in business for just over 35 years, and the backbone of our business has been news, broadcast, live event, and we've got long-standing relationships such as the NFL. Anything really stick and ball here domestically, we've either worked with in and around or exclusively for 18, 20, 25, 30 years, specifically with the NFL, and as well as expanded the portfolio to include groups like Intel, GE, Lockheed, and a few others that are outside of our traditional industry that we've supported in the past. So, when I look at it, and we are moving in and out of these markets, and COVID is definitely provided a challenge, right? And one that we've had to address not only internally as it relates to how we're moving through our existing book of business and supporting our long-term clients, but how do we move forward and reaching out to partners such as Boomerang, who we've known for 3+ decades, and really coordinating those resources to make sure that we can have conversations like this and provide value to a broader market as we function as a freight forwarder, but our reach is much more than this at this point. And just as an example, some of the markets that we have been pursuing, and it's a good leverage, lean back into our backbone, is some of the entertainment side of it, such as the streaming services, Apple, Netflix, Amazon. I mean, just if you look at what the pandemic has done and where it's moved spend between those three, they're going to try to contribute almost $90 billion in unique content production this year alone. So we see some of these areas moving rapidly, and we're adjusting our business to make sure that we can provide value and really that managed transportation solution that is designed to not only be customizable but scalable. And as we continue to kind of react to COVID and learn, it's interesting in that it's definitely changed the game a bit from our side, and we've been fortunate enough to retain the majority of our staff and add and continue to grow our footprint. Right now, we've got offices through the U.S., Hamburg, London, Moscow. We're just opening an office right now in Dubai, as well as Cork, Ireland, and it's been interesting for us to kind of evolve our business. On top of that as well, so we've got the traditional freight forwarding aspect that we manage, right? Everything there in front of you from air, ocean, 24/7, 365. We're open day, noon, and nights, and our clients require that, as we do have an international footprint. But we were just recently acquired by a company called NEP, Northeast Productions, which was one of our larger legacy clients. And the only reason why I bring that up is SOS has a footprint of about 150 plus professionals in and around logistics. Now we were acquired by NEP, so our footprint has expanded to almost 4,000 employees and their international footprint. Then backed by Carlisle, which is $200+ billion a year company. There really isn't much that we can't move into if it makes sense for us and our clients that we're speaking to. So we have the opportunity to scale to any size at this point. And certainly, if you look at how our business is evolving, we're moving out into these new markets and offering our services and growing the company and growing with our partners. So just a little bit of background, from an SOS standpoint, and we'll certainly turn it back over to Brandon. I'm going to be jumping in and out here just as, things that we'll talk a little bit about here, obviously COVID, front and center, Brexit, and a few other kind of that international issues that we're seeing, reacting to, and some of the things that we're bringing forward to make sure that our clients are successful. So, any questions, obviously I'm going to be here the entire time, and we'll turn it back over to Brandon right now. But again, thank you for everyone joining here, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so with the clientele that we have on the call, it looks like most of you guys are already shipping. For those that aren't shipping and are looking to do export shipments or import shipments, I think we need to start with the basics, and the basics are Incoterms. If you don't know what Incoterms are, I've been through 8-hour courses on Incoterms. You don't need an 8-hour course. What you need is Google. There's plenty of charts that basically lay out what an Incoterm is. I'll give you the brief definition. The International Chamber of Commerce created Incoterms as a worldwide standard to be used in contracts of sale for expressing the rights of obligations of buyers and sellers, specifically regarding the delivery of goods. And I want to bring up Incoterms because Incoterms is probably the most neglected thing out there for U.S. shippers and buyers, or sellers and buyers in the industry. We see it all the time. Basically, most U.S. shippers just take on ownership, and we see many times someone may sell something to someone in the UK, and they may not be well versed in Incoterms, and they may choose DDP terms, which basically says the seller is going to be responsible for all costs of the sale, including duties and taxes, VAT, transportation, basically door-to-door services. And what you're doing in those situations, if you were to select a DDP term, for instance, is you're basically having to inflate the cost of your goods to cover those costs, if you're aware. And then sometimes we've seen shippers that aren't well versed in this, and they end up losing money on the sale because they're having to pay 20% VAT tax in the UK, and it's not reclaimable. If a foreign importer tries to import something in the UK, you can do that, but you can't reclaim all of the VAT, duties, and taxes. So it's really important to understand your Incoterms and build your buyer-seller relationships based on those terms, what are considered fair. You know, currently in the United States and around the globe, we have all kinds of issues going on. This week, there was a fuel shortage on the West Coast. You know, COVID has really brought to light the cracks in the infrastructure of logistics. You have more goods coming into the States that are going out, which creates backlogs for people. It creates a higher cost, but there are some advantages, especially for U.S. shippers. More than anything, the U.S. market, at least for export air and ocean, has been fairly stable in cost. Your transit times are up, but your costs are very stable. You may see a 10, 20, or 30% increase in transportation costs out of the States over the past 14 months. But if you're shipping from China and you're paying for the logistics and the transportation, you're probably seeing more like 200 to 300% increases. And if you're not paying attention to your Incoterms and renegotiating those, maybe the manufacturers you're buying from China will take over some of those costs, because you know, when you negotiated those costs, you may have been paying $2 to $3 a kilo for air freight. In the peak of the pandemic, we saw $15, $18 a kilo coming out of China for air freight alone. And same with ocean. You may have been paying $2,000 a container coming out of China. Well, that may be $6,000 or $8,000 per container. So your Incoterms is basically the building block of your negotiated trade with your buyers and sellers. In the States, you have better rates, air freight rates out of the States. You're probably looking anywhere from $1 to $2 a kilo to pretty much any destination. Of course, you're going to pay more than that if you need express rates. Ocean freight is up, but it's not near what it was in some of the other markets that are considered head haul manufacturing markets. So if you get anything out of this call, I would implore you and your employees to confirm your Incoterms are working best for you, that you are being treated fairly by your sellers or your buyers with Incoterms. And then we'll talk a little bit about customs brokers and how they can help. SOS is a licensed broker, but we also have partner brokers around the world and in the States. And we try and fit our broker with the type of goods that we're moving. If it's for instance, if it's temporary import export, we have brokers that specialize in that. And then we have brokers that specialize in general commodities and things like that. So I would implore everyone to make sure that they have a broker that is fitting their need. We have a lot of things that happen after hours, especially with the market today. You have delays, you have truck late, you have ships arriving late. So having a flexible broker that's willing to put in time after 5 p.m. in today's environment is really important. And, you know, with a customs broker, it's a pretty simple setup. All you need is a U.S. Customs issue a U.S. Customs power of attorney that basically allows them to act on your behalf to clear goods in your name. I've actually put some slides here, and I'm sorry, we can share these with you after the fact, but this is a grid with Incoterms. We've got a sample power of attorney, and then we've got a sample SLI, which most of you probably are aware of. It's similar to a commercial invoice. It gives you would issue this to your freight company to do export work on your behalf. So after the call, if anyone would like samples of these, we can send that out to you. Let's talk a little bit more about industry news. As everyone's aware, probably air freight has the demand is up, and it's up for multiple different reasons. We have e-commerce that's moving more so now than it has in the past. The volume of people buying online versus going out is way up. But one of the things that is hurting that industry is when COVID hit, a lot of our airlines that we used to move goods on have stopped moving. Passenger aircraft moved probably 30 to 40% of the air freight around the world in the belly of the planes. And since there's so many less planes in the air right now, availability of space, flights are much harder to come by, and pricing is up. So it's really important that you understand going into a shipment, you need to set your expectations, or your shipping company needs to set good expectations that things are moving slower than they have in the past. And if you need something in a hurry, it's going to cost. Trucking in the US and in Europe and many other countries, capacity remains extremely high. There's in the US alone, there's just not enough trucks on the road and equipment on the road to manage what's out there. One of the largest, I'll say that again, the largest freight forwarding trucking company in the United States. Most of you guys probably don't know them, but they move 90% of freight forwarders' freight. Had an embargo last week for the first time off the West Coast because they had so much freight in trucks that they couldn't move it all. They didn't have enough drivers to move them. That's starting to lighten up, but we're going to expect to see more of those things over the next probably 4 to 6 months. Ocean freight ports remain backlogged. Pricing is elevated, as we've already talked. A lot of that is, again, it just kind of a snowball effect. You have less workers on the docks because of COVID requirements, and you have an increase of freight moving. E-commerce, again, I've already touched on that. Really not a lot more to say about that. And then we put a little bit about sustainability. One of the clients that we're working with now are actually, they're looking at bringing some plants into the U.S. and they're looking at manufacturing here in the U.S. Tractors and trailers, buses that are all battery powered. So this is an area that we think that is going to grow. It's a good opportunity for investment right now, but I think everyone should be looking at this as a means to the future.
Yeah, and I would just add something there real quick, Brandon. We look at it just from an e-commerce standpoint. I was looking at some trade articles about a week ago, and they were, some of the statistics are just shocking. Health and safety products up almost 400%. I think groceries, online grocery deliveries were up 350%. Just massive numbers that are continuing to, kind of strain the system that we have that was already bottlenecked because of COVID. And the sustainability piece I would just touch on a little bit here as we look at it across our current portfolio, but as we continue to reach out and COVID is bringing things forward and circle pretty quick. And, we see sustainability becoming more and more of a, kind of an endemic issue where it's not only is it being talked about, as well as diversity and some of the other social economic things that we're seeing, but some of the larger clients and specific markets, it's becoming something that you have to address. You have to have a statement. You've got to have a partner. You've got to have something that says, hey, this is what we're doing now. This is what we plan on doing in the future. And it just seems to be, COVID has kind of kickstarted it, and it's something that's gaining momentum, not only from an opportunistic standpoint, but also within the current client, clients that we work with. It's, hey, what are you doing? What are you seeing? What is the industry moving towards? So that conversation is continuing to build momentum.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so let's just move on. We're going to talk a little bit about ATA Carnets, temporary imports and exports. This is a specialty for SOS Global, as Steve mentioned. We've got 30 plus years experience handling events around the world. Industries such as live events, sports, broadcast, music, touring, trade show, expos, major motion film, all utilize Carnets to their advantage. There is, I think, currently 195 countries in the world today. Half of those accept ATA Carnets. And for those of you that don't know what an ATA Carnet is, we explain it to our clients. It's basically a passport, just like your personal passport, for freight. It's a document. As you walk through immigration to the customs officer, you open your passport up, he reviews it, he stamps it, and you're free to go. A Carnet works the exact same way. We hand carry a Carnet through customs. We do the same process exactly with it, and it saves time, energy, cost in a lot of areas. It's a very simple, informal way to get your goods into a country, cleared, and into, I don't know if we would call it commerce, but into whatever it's going for, without all of the red tape that you would typically do with a temporary import bond or a permanent entry. We've worked now with USCIB and Boomerang Carnet for 20 plus years and have a great relationship with them. Not everyone can handle Carnets. I bring this up because we see this happen a lot. The FedExes, the DHLs, UPSs of the world, they are very good at what they do. Unfortunately, this is not something they do well. They move packages, lots of packages. If you have a shipment stuck in Memphis, chances are it will be stuck for a few days trying to find someone to answer a phone. You need someone with experience that knows how to handle Carnets. If if you open this up to your business. Basically, you need someone on both ends. You need someone that understands the customs formalities in each country, and who's basically going to white glove your shipment from door to door. At the end of the day, there's a cost savings in doing it. You get your freight quicker and less drama. Everybody likes less drama. So with that said, I'll leave it to, I think, is it Kyle? Are you jumping on next?
Yes, I'll be jumping on. Thank you, Brandon. And thank you, Brandon, Steve, Moira, and obviously our host, Brendan Kelly. I'm going to go ahead. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for the ATA Carnet portion of the presentation, which was a great lead-in by Brandon here. Let me see. Hopefully this is all coming across. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into the world of ATA Carnets. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about a quick case study so that you can see exactly how Carnets can benefit your business and your temporary exports, and how you can save money in the process. So first, we'll talk about the Carnet on the whole and the scope of its use. I usually read this definition off verbatim because I do believe that it bears repeating. What is the ATA Carnet? It's an international unified customs document that provides for temporary import duty and tax deferment for three main categories of goods to a worldwide system of countries. Virtually every industry can benefit from the use of ATA Carnets. Now, those three main categories are what we consider the underlying conventions of the ATA Carnet convention are commercial samples. So if you are a watch manufacturer and you bring a bunch of timepieces over to Switzerland to demo to clients on a temporary basis, you would file that under commercial samples. Jewelry, clothing, any sort of machinery. We have a lot of, in Texas especially, with all the coal and petroleum exports that you folks do. We have a lot of people with mining equipment. Anything that you're going to be demoing as a sample would be filed under commercial samples. Professional equipment is the next one. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's any time that you're going to be using equipment while abroad in its professional capacity. Very large sect of Carnet users is the film and production industry. If you're taking $500,000 worth of camera gear to go film a movie in China, nobody wants to pay those high duties and taxes just in order to bring the goods in. So the Carnet, again, it's an agreement that it's a temporary import, and there's a bond that backs it that you defer that duty and tax assessment. We work with, well, as the entertainment industry is dying down, not so much currently, but symphonies, rock and roll musicians, anytime, again, you're bringing professional equipment, research equipment, testing and analysis, you would file it under that. The last one is exhibitions and fairs. That's a very large usage of the ATA Carnet is if you're going to be exhibiting at a foreign trade show or a public event, you bring all your samples, your trade show booth itself, all that has value as far as customs is concerned. You can file your Carnet under one of these, two of these, all three of these if appropriate, but you would have to choose one of these underlying conventions. This is just a brief overview, in no way an exhaustive list, because pretty much anything could be allowable on a Carnet. We see things from manufactured goods, UAVs, the drone and unmanned industry is very large user of Carnets, especially in the last decade, I'd say. Demo equipment, livestock, we do a lot of Carnets for horses, especially with, racing and events overseas. Again, musical instruments, film equipment is huge, research, etc. There are a few caveats or a few exceptions to what can be allowed on an ATA Carnet. That includes things like consumable or disposable items. It is not to say that you cannot ship those goods along with a Carnet shipment, but they can't be listed on the Carnet because they're not coming back out in the same form, fashion, quantity, volume. So if you're going to a trade show and you have all your swag or your giveaway items, the literature, your brochures, pamphlets, you would not list those on the Carnet. And then postal traffic as well is another exception. So currently, as Brandon had mentioned, 87 plus countries and territories are signatory to the International Carnet Convention. That means they both issue carnets for their residents or their entities, their companies going abroad, but they also accept carnets for other countries to come in on a temporary basis. More countries are being added all the time. Most recently to come on board was Kazakhstan. Before that, I believe the more recent one was Brazil. But on our website, you're always going to see the list of Carnet accepting countries and any updates as far as who's coming on. One I know that has been working on it for a while is Saudi Arabia. There's no timeline for it, but definitely more and more countries being added all the time. It's valid for 12 months from the date of issue, not the date of first use. So at least for us, we can turn a Carnet around in a day or two. So we don't usually recommend applying, 3 months in advance of your shipment, because you're kind of burning 3 months of the validity of the Carnet and the Carnet bond. So it's good for 12 months, multiple trips, multiple countries. Certain countries can limit the term of use. For instance, Mexico in the last couple of years has been extremely strict on a 6-month importation limit. China is the same way, 6 months. India, for example, if you're going in under professional equipment, they limit it to 2 months with the ability to extend. Most of these countries that do limit that term will offer and entertain a extension till the full validity of the Carnet. You would just have to have your broker or your freight agent ask customs for that. But they will most often be able to extend it to the full year the Carnet is good for. But by and large, most countries will give you the entire year. It can be issued directly to the exporter, or in the Carnet world, what we call the holder. The holder is not who's physically holding the document. It's usually the company who owns or assumes liability of the goods. So we can issue it directly to the holder or via their freight forwarder. We have a lot of clients that come in that work with a company such as SOS that say, hey, look, you guys are handling the shipment. Go ahead and get the Carnet for me as well. As long as there's a power of attorney, of course, for them to do so, we can issue it directly to the freight forwarder, which sometimes saves time if it's an immediate need for the export. This is just a brief graphic of currently, so you can see the current countries and territories which the ATA Carnet system is in force. We will definitely make these slides available through Brendan Kelly, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it here, but it started, the Carnet system entered into force in the early 1960s, and it was just a brief handful of European countries, but really since then it has spread to most of the industrialized world. So as far as how they work, this is universally, no matter what country you get your Carnet from, these are always the same colors. The front and back covers are green, the yellow, we're going to get to it on the next page, but the yellow are what are called counterfoils, the yellow and whites. They're the trip-specific certificates, kind of like the pages on your passport, where customs stamps and signs the entry and the exit of the goods. The yellow ones are always for the origin country. So if you're getting a U.S. Carnet, U.S. Customs would stamp you out of and back into the U.S. on the yellow counterfoils. The white counterfoils and their corresponding vouchers are used by foreign customs. They don't say what country you're going to. Again, it's not country specific, it's good specific. You could go to 20 different countries and use 20 different white counterfoils without indicating, it's not going to say Germany or Australia on them. They're used universally. But always remember yellow for the US or the origin country and white for the foreign customs. Now, blue counterfoils, if anybody on this webinar here does have experience with ATA Carnets, they may have never seen a blue counterfoil. Traditionally, they're called transit counterfoils. Traditionally, they were used for bonded inland travel, but in today's climate, only 6 countries are really requiring them to be in the Carnet. Those are Bulgaria, China, Italy, Poland, Russia, and Switzerland. We have seen Brazil lately request them. It's not an official ruling, but again, it's only a handful of countries, so you may very well have never seen a blue counterfoil. Traditionally, it's just the yellow and the whites, and then the back green cover. Now, this is in the order of what the document looks like. This next slide here, you'll see that yellow comes towards the end again, because this is in the order of how it is used. Your front green cover is kind of like the heart of the Carnet, or the meat and potatoes, so to speak. It's got all your relative information listed on there, the holder company, the expiration date, your list of authorized representatives who you deem authorized to handle your Carnet, be it your colleagues if it's a hand carry, or your customs brokers and your freight forwarders if it's a cargo shipment. It's got the activation stamp by U.S. Customs. In some presentations, we have a very detailed page-by-page, box-by-box review. If anybody ever has any questions about Carnets or the pages within them, feel free to reach out. We're just going to go through this briefly, but on the reverse side of that front green cover page is always going to be your master, what is considered the general list. It's almost a deceptive term because it's actually a very detailed and itemized list of each piece that you're going to be listing on your Carnet and covering by the Carnet's bond. Pertinent information include make, model, serial number. If there's any serialization or any sort of other ID or part numbers, you want to make sure that that's listed on your general list, because Customs doesn't know, one camera from another, one guitar from another, one piece of artwork from another. So they look to these identifiers such as serial numbers, etc., to make sure that when they do their inspection, what's in front of them is what's actually on the Carnet. They can match it up down to the digit on the serial number. They know that your Carnet's bond was placed correctly. So when you present this to U.S. Customs the very first time, they will activate it by stamping and signing on the front green cover page. They will then immediately stamp you out of the country on the yellow exportation counterfoil. The counterfoils are your record, your proof that the goods entered and exited each country. Those stay in your Carnet. If you look at the white, when you get to the foreign country, the white importation counterfoil is validated, showing the goods were imported on X day, at X time, at X port. There's also, every white counterfoil has a corresponding voucher. Now, the voucher is a full-size sheet. It's kind of like a receipt. Those are kept and retained by foreign customs. It's their proof that the goods entered their country. Now, U.S. Carnets do not have vouchers that go along with the yellow counterfoils. Most all other countries do. So their origin countries, for instance, we also issue Carnets in the UK. We partner with the Liverpool Chamber of Commerce. A UK Carnet will have vouchers for the origin country that are kept by UK Customs, for instance. But in a US Carnet, US Customs did away with using vouchers a long time ago. All they need to see when it comes back, because it's just US goods returning, is that the counterfoil was validated. They know that it was properly registered before you left. Again, entering into the foreign country, they'll stamp your white counterfoil, take out their voucher. You go, you do your demo, you do your research, you do your trade show, you make your movie, and on the way back out, the re-exportation white counterfoil will be validated. Again, that stays with you. That's your proof. The re-exportation voucher will then be retained and removed and kept by foreign customs. Now, what happens behind the scenes is those two vouchers, even if they're at different ports, ultimately go to the guaranteeing association for Carnets in that country. Every Carnet country has a guaranteeing association for Carnets. Usually it's their Chamber of Commerce. In the US, it's the USCIB, which is the United States Council for International Business. But point being is, once this Carnet expires, that guaranteeing association is going to have record, a physical receipt of the goods entering on this day, exiting on this day, and they know that you maintain compliance, you got out within the 12 months, and that's how you avoid the duty and tax assessment. The blues, again, if you're going to one of those 6 countries, will include them. Sometimes they use them, sometimes they don't. And next, upon return to the US, you're going to see that the re-importation yellow counterfoil is going to be marked and stamped and signed by US Customs, showing the goods came back in. The back page is always, again, going to be green. That just has notes on the Carnet and its usage. It's got the list of the foreign guaranteeing associations on it. It also has the contact information for who issued your Carnet, so you know where to return it to. Every Carnet needs to be returned to the issuing authority for closure, and so that the bond can be canceled out. One big thing is timely re-exportation. It's probably the biggest condition to be observed when you're importing temporarily with a ATA Carnet. The expiration date of the Carnet is the date that you want your goods back into the US, or at very least exported from the foreign country. Sometimes if you come back, like you push it all the way to the last day and say you return ocean freight and your Carnet expires whilst in transit, US Customs can accept that as a valid means of re-import. Oftentimes they'll make you file something like a U.S. goods returned entry or something along those lines, but you definitely want to have it out of the foreign country by that expiration date or the date limited by customs. That second box on the white counterfoil is always going to say final date for re-exportation. that could be the expiration date, or if, again, a country has a limit, it might be a limited date. So you always want to be cognizant of the final date of re-export that customs lists when they stamp for the importation. If items leave after the expiration date and you don't apply for an extension, which is called a replacement carnet, or convert it to a permanent entry, they're going to send a bill for import duties and taxes and or charge a regularization fee. So this here is just a brief graphic. It's actually from one of our bigger clients in the state of Texas. They manufacture technical computer equipment. Just to show you really the key of the Carnet, it is a money-saving tool. By and large, it's definitely a cheap way to go about getting your goods into and out of the foreign countries. So just for example, just this one client of ours, since 2010, they had obtained 213 Carnets from us. If you see here, they went all over the world, but some of the destinations were China, EU, India, South Korea, Japan, Mexico, and among many others. Now, the total value covered by all 213 of those Carnets was $21.82 million worth of goods this one company put on their Carnets. With that, the total out-of-pocket Carnet cost for them was $167,000, including their bond fees, processing fees, ancillary fees. Now, if we look at two benchmarks, sometimes we like to say duties and taxes in most cases can range up to 40% of your goods. If we take 20% of that almost $22 million, they'd be paying $4.36 million in import duty and tax. Now, duty is duty. It is, often returnable, albeit a process definitely to do a duty drawback. 40%, $8.73 million. But if we look at just the VAT, just the tax in China, for instance, at 17%, that's $3.71 million, and that's just the taxes. Sweden, 25%, $5.45 million. Canada, one of the lowest VAT countries at only 5%, still over $1 million in tax alone, as to where, again, for $22 million worth of goods, the Carnet cost was $167K. So again, it's just an illustration so you can see the numbers at just how much of a cost-saving tool and how it helps you expand your business on a cheaper level. Just a few tips here for when you're getting a Carnet. You want to be prepared. You want to submit your application at least 2 to 3 days before your travel, if available. Again, we can usually do it same day if we need to, but if FedEx has a holdup in the Memphis hub and you can't get your Carnet that following day, you might be stuck. So try to submit it 2 to 3 days, maybe a week before you travel, and you should be good to go. Before you leave, if you already have a Carnet, say you used it for a trip 3 months ago, you want to inspect it for accuracy. Things like check your authorized representatives. If you've got a new crew member that's going to be traveling with the Carnet and the goods, if they're not listed, either we or you can draft up a letter adding them, but you want to make sure that somebody who's traveling with the Carnet is always listed as an authorized representative. You want to review your list, check serial numbers. If you need extra counterfoil certificates, those can always be added at any point throughout the year of your Carnet. Especially in COVID times, travel and shipments are largely undetermined. So if you want to start off with the standard 2 trips that the Carnet comes with, you can do so and then order more as you go. You would want to arrive early at the airport if you are going to be hand carrying and not going with a cargo shipment. You want to make sure to give yourself time to get down to customs, make sure they have time to inspect your goods, make sure that they are open, especially now during COVID, reduced staff, reduced hours, etc. We have some detailed customs maps on our website if you ever want to check those out. But usually you want to go right to the source and call your local customs office and make sure that somebody's going to be there. You also want to look up advisories. Certain countries have specific rules and requirements. By and large, it is definitely a universal system. But again, if you're going to Qatar, for instance, they only accept Carnets for exhibitions and fairs. You have to tell them exactly what trade show you're going to. So if you applied for your Carnet and you told your issuing agent you were going to Germany, and then 6 months later you wanted to go to Qatar, but you had your Carnet listed under professional equipment, you would likely have issues and have your Carnet rejected. So again, by and large, it is a universal system. Most countries will accept Carnets for all classifications, but you want to be definitely cognizant of what countries you're going to and see if they have any advisories. These are just, we talked about goods allowable on the Carnet, but these are just some examples of Carnet utilization, how you can use the Carnet to your benefit. and to expand your business. Things, again, like professional equipment, tools of the trade, conferences, demos, manufactured goods, trade shows and events, research and analysis, training, prototypes, samples, etc. Again, in Texas, a big exporter is the coal and petroleum, also followed up by computer and electronics. So companies like Intel, put all their samples on a Carnet and be able to demonstrate them to foreign buyers on a temporary basis and not have to pay that import duty and tax. So lastly, just a couple other benefits of the Carnet. Again, the big one is it's a money saver. One affordable fee, 12 months you got your document for. You could go to 20, 30 different countries, and we have clients that do without paying taxes or duty in any of those. It is not country specific, as I had said before. You can go to multiple countries with the same document. It is good specific. A lot of times you can ship less items than are on there as long as you've got them itemized out. You could, in the film industry, if you've got, your all the gear that you own, and then on the next shoot, you only want to take half of it, that's fine. But you cannot add items after the Carnet has been issued. It's item specific, but the good thing, it is not country specific. It's item specific because of the bond that goes behind it. It can be used for both hand carry trips and cargo shipments. Sometimes, and it's not to say just because the first trip you used was a hand carry, then COVID hit, and then you wanted to ship your goods, you can definitely do that. It works for both. And it's on hand. I mean, you've got your document, it's ready to go. Again, Brandon had said it's a passport for your goods. You need to travel at the drop of a hat, you've got your Carnet in hand, you're ready to go. It also serves as registration of your goods with U.S. Customs. So if anybody has ever filled out the CBP form 4455, you do not have to do that with a Carnet because that activation stamp on the front cover that we talked about is that U.S. registration of goods. So it's just a little bit less paperwork that you have to fill out. You also wouldn't have to file a U.S. goods return entry coming back because, again, it was validated by U.S. Customs prior to your export. This is just our contact information. Again, we're going to make these slides available if anybody needs to reach out or ever has any questions. And then I believe that is going to be it for me. And we're pretty much right up to 11. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see the chat here. I'll turn it back over to Brendan at this point.
Hi, thanks very much, Kyle. I actually have a question for you, and thanks again to Brandon and Stephen for their great advice and expertise on especially the race cars. Sounded very exciting. I used to be an Indy fan when I was a boy and followed that very closely.
Oh, nice.
And that sounds definitely exciting. My question really, and I guess I was just thinking of Kyle, but for all of you is one thing we encounter a lot is U.S. export law. So I'm guessing, my question is there, one of the first questions I have is there somewhere on the Carnet where you would have something like an export destination control statement to, make sure there's no transshipment or something?
I'll actually turn
what I'm saying? So
I'll actually turn that one over to Brandon if he wants to address that. Things like export licenses, export controls are a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. Maybe Brandon might be able to add a little bit more insight into that area.
As far as I know, there's no requirements for that.
On the Carnet itself.
It's something that I can look into. Of course, if we're talking about ITAR and licenses, then that's a completely different subject that we would have to open up probably another 30 minutes for. But what I can do though is I can
at least, yeah.
What I can do is I can confirm that with our ops team, and then I can kind of report back on a Q&A type style.
That's great, and yes, maybe if there's some answers you can send across, I'd be glad to get them out with your slides and contact information. I guess it's just a reminder, I guess I'm giving as well, that of course licensing requirements are always apply, and if you have something and you send it to a trade show for say oil and gas in Germany or something, that there's always this, I guess you'd say, danger of having it being bought by somebody in Iran and then shipped to Iran suddenly. So they still have the responsibility for that ultimate destination, and if there's a sanctioned country. So I would just recommend at least always calling your local trade office in the U.S. just to discuss with them and see if they can give some advice on that. You still, everything is still, has, can't end up in Cuba without a license, for example, an OFAC license as opposed to export licensing license. And we do have an official destination control statement by the BIS, and I'll be glad to send that out. Many companies have and use their own. This one is written by the U.S. attorneys in that office, so you're free to take it since you've already paid for it. And I just wanted to give those reminders there. So because the excitement involved with Carnets, I think people are all ready to go right now, and just to remember their licensing requirements on that. So my question I had for you as well, Kyle, and for Ernestine, is how big can these items go, and is there a size limitation? Is there a price limitation on these?
As far as a price limitation, definitely not, and also not a size limitation. Obviously, the size of the cargo is going to be determine your actual freight cost. But as far as the Carnet goes, we've done, state orchestras that have $200-300 million, $600 million worth of antique instruments listed on there. It's the cost of the Carnet is determined by the value. So as you increase your value, your cost of your Carnet will go up. But there's definitely not a limit. I've done Carnets for $20 worth of goods, literally, and I've done Carnets for almost $1 billion worth of goods.
Yeah, I can tell you from a size standpoint, we're actually working on a couple of Carnets for the Olympics right now, where we're exporting about 15 mobile broadcast units. Those are tractors and trailers under ATA Carnets to Japan. So
you have 15 trailers that you're actually packing and sending.
Yeah, well, 15 trailers, they're actually mobile broadcast units, that all the equipment's hardwired in, but you still get an itemized list like it would be a loaded trailer, basically. And those units are $10 million, $12 million each, and we're shipping them to Tokyo for the Olympics.
Now, what about a service export? I was just thinking, just in the I had a company that had some, mining equipment, probably worth about $9 million or so, and wanted to ship to another country. Can they use that Carnet because they often will bring it back? So can they use it for 6 months and then bring that mining equipment or oil and gas equipment?
Absolutely.
Popular in Houston?
Yeah, most
and what if they want to extend it? What if they want to say, the business is going very well, and they need to extend it, some downhole equipment or something for another year? Can they get an extension on the Carnet?
That is a great question, and usually in a full hour Carnet presentation, I'll address what's called a replacement Carnet. I briefly alluded to it. Most countries will accept what's called a replacement Carnet. It's not to where if you lost your Carnet and you needed just a new set of paperwork, I need a replacement. It's a little bit of a deceptive term in the Carnet world. That's a duplicate. Within the first 12 months, if you just need new paperwork, you get a duplicate Carnet. If you're on month 11 out of 12 and your research or your job in Germany is coming up and it's just not feasible to get the goods re-exported prior to the expiration, you apply for a replacement Carnet. It's a new Carnet that's issued and it's a new bond that's issued, but it's a very particular type of Carnet that is tied to the original and used to extend the stay in the foreign country up to another 12 months. Rule of thumb is most countries will accept one replacement. So up to a total of 24 months in country without the duties and taxes. I have seen on a case-by-case basis, foreign customs agree to a second, third. I think the record I saw was 11 replacements. They were working directly with the Turkish government, but that's an anomaly. Usually you want to stick to an extension an extra 1 year.
And what if they decided, at the end of the 12 or 24 months, the company over in that has this downhole equipment, say in Brazil or whatever, said, we really love this equipment. Can we just buy it from you? Can they, at that point, can they do that? Can they just buy it and then report it?
Yep, that's another great thing about the Carnet is, yes, the intention is for a temporary importation, but if you say, you're, again, a watch manufacturer, you bring your timepieces, 100 timepieces to an exhibition, and you hope they all sell, but maybe 50 of them do, 50 of them don't. You use the Carnet to defer the duty and tax on what is coming back out. And if somebody does want to purchase equipment, or you want to leave it there on a permanent basis, you can approach customs and convert it to a permanent entry. Obviously, at that point, you would pay the duties and tax, but it is not to say you have to, just because it went in under a Carnet, you have to bring it back to the US, then send it back as a permanent import. You can break that liability and release that and keep the goods in the foreign country when it was imported under a Carnet.
And so they should be checking with their Carnet providers on that, right? They should be checking
Correct.
with their freight forwarders also and letting them know.
Correct.
Here in the
Yeah,
US.
I would add that you would want to do it prior to it expiring. Once it expires, then you're probably going to pay the duties and taxes regardless, and you are you may be subject to customs fines, foreign customs fines. But the important thing is staying in front. If you see that you've got equipment that's going to stay longer than 12 months, within 10 months, hopefully you've got an idea if it's going to stay longer or not, and you want to get on it, at least 30 days prior, but I would even say 60 days prior. So what we do with our clients is we just calendar, we put calendar reminders in when we want to start asking those questions. What's going on with the shipment? Are you going to be returning it? And you're given a lot of time, and then those conversations usually are a lot easier on the front end versus after the fact.
Brendan, do you want to maybe turn it over to the questions that are in the chat?
Absolutely, sure. Yes, now I don't see them on mine, and I'm going to ask Maura or yourself maybe to read them if you can see them. And that would be great if you want to also open up the phone line and read those questions off.
Perfect.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
We'll start with the first one that came in, and we'll see how many we can get through here. Lori, hi, by the way. If I don't get to your question for some reason, you and I can chat offline. It's good to see you here. But I've got somebody named SARD. First question from them says, what happens if the importer fails to declare at the time of export? Example, a vessel imported into U.S. from EU departs for a regalia in a foreign country, Greenland, via Alaska, and then tries to come back to the U.S. from Greenland after regalia in a foreign country. What I'm thinking he might be asking is if you don't declare it as a Carnet exportation upon the export, you can't get a Carnet. The Carnet does need to be validated prior to the goods leaving the U.S. So you wouldn't be able to deploy a Carnet to goods that have already left the U.S. At that point, you would work with somebody like SOS or a broker and figure out different forms of temporary imports into these foreign countries, like a TIB, and then like a U.S. goods return entry. I don't know if Brandon, you have, unless I'm misreading this question, if Brandon, you have.
No, I think you nailed it. That's exactly what would happen in that scenario is if it weren't declared or the voucher wasn't declared activated on export, then
I think he's weighing in. He said Carnet for the vessel was already in place. So does that mean it just wasn't stamped prior to export? I've seen foreign customs, if they do have a Carnet and it has already left, but it wasn't validated by U.S. Customs prior to the export, most often foreign customs will reject that Carnet. Now, ironically, just yesterday, one of my clients got stuck in Romania because their exporter, their freight forwarder, wasn't so familiar with Carnets, and they hadn't used them. They didn't realize that it needed to be validated. We jumped in right away and issued a guarantee letter. They had their foreign client, which was GE, issue a guarantee letter and an error letter as well. And Customs did accept it, and they agreed to stamp and sign off on the Carnet, even though it wasn't properly validated by U.S. Customs. But by all means, that's a gamble. I mean, foreign customs does not need to accept a unactivated Carnet. I think the next question here was, what again are the countries that require blue foils? I am going to just put this in the chat. Bulgaria, China, Italy.
and SARD, if we didn't get to if we didn't explain that, I'm more than, I can jump on a call with you after this call and we can kind of go over what exactly you're looking for on the first question.
Okay, and I just answered the ones about the blue foils. The next question was, what happens if your Carnet items go to one of those blue? Well, we can deploy them internationally. If you didn't have the blue foils, you just might be waiting for FedEx to get it there. But again, even those 6 countries, sometimes they use them, sometimes they don't. Like China, for instance, I feel like 50% of the time they'll use them. Italy, for example, I don't remember the last time I saw Italian Customs use a blue counterfoil, even though they want to say that they request them. So it's really at their discretion, but we can always ship them again and deploy them after the Carnet, after the goods are already in the foreign country. You just might be waiting. What is involved with applying for extension? Who handles the extension? How long does that take? Again, that's the replacement Carnet. You want to submit that application at least 3 to 4 weeks prior to expiration, because unlike an original Carnet, we've got to get the application in, we've got to get a scan of the Carnet to make sure it was properly validated in the foreign country. We need to make an appointment with U.S. Customs. We physically run that down to Customs for you, have it activated. Then we got to leave time for it to be shipped overseas to marry up with the original Carnet, and your feet on the ground, be it your colleague or your freight agent or your broker in the foreign country, will take both the original and the replacement Carnet to foreign customs. They'll stamp out the first one and they'll stamp in the replacement. So you want to leave yourself at least 3 to 4 weeks prior to expiration. Trying to just cruise through these so that we can get to as many as we can. What if your item does not have an identifying mark? What is an acceptable method for marking a guitar, etc.? What is the procedure if the Carnet is lost while abroad? Okay, so identifying marks, obviously Customs understands that not everything has a serial number, not everything has an ID number. It is not to say you need to generate one. Just do your best with a good description like make and model. Guitars often, ironically, do have serial numbers. If not, you would say 1967 Fender Stratocaster with sunburst, style design. Just do your best with a very detailed description. And then what happens, what's the procedure if a Carnet is lost while abroad? We would issue the duplicate Carnet. We would take it down to Customs again, have it activated for you, or we can send it to you or your freight forwarder and they can do that. Then you send it to meet up with the goods in the foreign country. You don't need to go back and get all the in and out stamps. Those moves have already been made, but it does still need to be activated by U.S. Customs. Original, duplicate, replacement always needs to be activated by U.S. Customs on the front green cover page.
And one thing I would add, especially for those that are hand carrying, it's always easier once you've had your Carnet validated or your voucher stamped into a country, snap a photo of it. Just make it, and that way, if it does get lost, it's nice to have proof that there was a stamp in it. They may or may not accept it, but it makes things easier if you can. If your customs officer can take the replacement Carnet in with some documented proof that it was exported and imported correctly and it was lost. So we tell our clients always take pictures of the finished product basically and save them on your phone. And then if something comes up, share them.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Definitely good advice there. Next one is from Lori. Again, hi, Lori. Good to see you here. Since the Carnet is item specific, not country specific, who is identified on the front page? Who is the owner of the Carnet? The owner is the holder, so the company, that's the very first box A. That'll be the company's information, but box B is the list of authorized representatives. And yes, would all parties in all countries need to be listed? We always recommend err on the side of caution and list anybody that you can think of that in the door-to-door round trip would ever be involved with it. Your brokers, your forwarders, any third-party brokers or forwarders that they might be working with in the foreign country, or if you're doing a hand carry, even if people aren't traveling, list anybody on your company that you would ever even want to look at the document, because it's not to say just because they're on there they need to use it or need to be in front of Customs, but it does give them the authority to. So you'd want to list as many entities or individuals as you can. Again, if something happens and say you work with forwarder A and then 6 months later you're working with forwarder B, or again, you get a new crew member on, we can always issue a letter, an authorized representative letter. We would stamp it, sign it. That has to be done on letterhead by either the holder company, which is whom owns or assumes liability of the goods, or the issuing authority, which would be us in that case. When will or is there talk of digital carnets? Another great question. I wish I had more information on it. There is a pilot program for what's going to ultimately be the e-carnet. Someday it will or should be an electronic document. There were 6 countries that were pilot testing the program pre-COVID. That has been largely put on hold, but ultimately an e-carnet is going to be a thing. But if you could imagine getting almost 100 countries and territories on board with both the technology and the training to accept what was always a manual paper document, it's going to take some time. Brandon, I don't know if you get clients asking you a lot about the e-carnet.
We do, and we're looking forward to it, but we know our industry runs slow, so I would think we're at least 3 to 5 years out from it.
Yeah, I would say that would be at minimum, in my opinion.
Hey, that's a great question. Thank you. And I'm willing to stay on if you want. I know participants are free to drop off. They could have left at 11, but if you want to read some more of the questions out and get some answers, that's fine with me. You can go, keep going on that. And I do want to make sure we get those questions answered by people. And then if the people dropped off, they'll get the recording of those answers if you'd like to do that.
I'm definitely happy to stay on for anybody who's
I think these are great.
Yeah.
These are great questions, and I'm really excited about them. So
yeah, they are. It's awesome to see such great questions and engagement. Definitely, will stay on. To anybody who will be dropping off, just again, thank you so much for your time and attendance. But let's get to the rest of these here. Again, from Sard, what happens if something gets stolen while at the show? That is kind of a gray area sometimes. I have seen customs. Usually we're going to get you directly involved with our claims department and our claims manager. You can present a police report. Sometimes customs will say, look, we understand. Sometimes we have seen them say, look, goods came into my country, but didn't leave and pay the duties and taxes. Brandon, what's your experience been when stolen goods?
That's exactly it. And it really depends on the country. I mean, you send something into Brazil and chances are, if it gets stolen while it's in Brazil, you're going to have to pay duties and taxes. So you need to be prepared for that. You may send something into the UK and you won't have, they may give you some grace on it. So it's definitely, it's country specific, really, who will work with you more than not. But it's something that you do need to kind of protect yourself on.
Yeah, and sometimes even customs office or officer specific, depending on the kind of day they're having.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Another one from Lori here. We have an office in UK. We may send equipment to UK office for prep for a demo to another country. If we send equipment under Carnet to UK and they use a Carnet for the destination country, can both Carnets will be sent through international countries for annotation. So I'm wondering if you mean by that you send goods under a US Carnet to the UK and then UK adds their own Carnet with additional goods, if I'm understanding that correctly. And at that point, yes, you would use, because it's all about the origin country, you'd use the US and the UK Carnet conjunctively. If you're talking about sending goods on a US Carnet to the UK and then those are amended, that's kind of a no-no in the Carnet world. If it's an under the hood type of thing where it's just a software update, is customs really going to know, but you should not be enhancing the value. You can't send, a broken car for restoration and a complete body work and paint job and have it come out worth 50 grand, more than it came in because of the bond liability behind it. Brandon, I don't know if you want to add to that at all, if you've seen clients try to do that, or again, if I'm misunderstanding the question.
Well, I think you hit it on the head again, Kyle. What we typically do is if you're adding supporting gear, like we have a lot of clients that do exactly what you're saying. But what happens is they'll send a camera in that goes with a specific kit that may be in the UK. So we provide one Carnet for the camera out of the States. And then the kit gets a second Carnet. We leave the camera off the UK Carnet because it already has a Carnet, and then the supporting kit gets its own, and then they travel together. 2 Carnets go with the kit.
Gotcha.
But you wouldn't want to double up items on a Carnet. I've seen people do that in error before, but you certainly wouldn't want to. You just use both Carnets.
Thank you. Next again from Sard here. Carnet for the, oh, that was in previous, the customer. Okay, so that one we already talked about. And then Sard again. So on the boat that left without telling U.S. Customs to Greenland, what happens at the time of re-import to the U.S. for further export to EU country of origin? Are
you talking about moving, Sard? Are you talking about it moves in bond, or is it going to actually enter commerce in the U.S. when it returns? Re-import to U.S. If you're talking about, a full re-importation, you do a return of U.S. goods. You should have proof that the goods exported from the U.S., even if the Carnet wasn't valid. You got bill of lading, you've got documentation. So you should be able to do a U.S. form 4455 for the import into the U.S. And then you if you have a new shipment that exports back to the EU, then it is not U.S. goods, it's EU goods. So let me go back.
So that's where I think the confusion on my end lied. I thought it was a U.S. Carnet. So if it was a EU Carnet and it was properly validated upon export from the EU, and then you're saying it just cleared into the U.S. without having the Carnet validated on the initial import to the U.S., my question there would be, how did it get through? Was a different form of temporary entry filed? Was duties and taxes assessed? And while he's doing that, I think there's another, I just want to check this Q&A box because I believe that there's a question here. Sard, we'll get back to you in a second. Anonymous attendee, if exporting manufacturing tools temporarily to Mexico to produce components for U.S. production, this would normally become an assist, and the U.S. import value of the components would have to incorporate the value of the tools. Would exporting under a Carnet avoid incorporating the value of the tools with the components for the 7501 under the assist? Brandon, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I think we want to declare everything on the Carnet. I mean,
right.
If you've got tools, you can estimate, if they're used tools, you can estimate those values if the kit goes with the main cargo. So I would list everything on there unless it's things that aren't being returned, office supplies and pens and pencils, and we would do a separate entry on that, just a permanent entry, or say you'd probably be better off not shipping it and, purchasing those things locally. I don't know if that answers your question, but if I understand it correctly.
And so Sard waved back in. So I think it's the same situation. We just had the countries reversed. So it was an EU Carnet. It was in place, but it wasn't validated by customs in Greenland when it left. Sounds like it was validated into and out of the U.S. So you would just have to file a return entry if customs did not accept the Carnet as a valid registration because they never activated it. So you would have your broker or your forwarder file a return entry for those goods if they don't accept the Carnet. And I'm hoping that has answered your question. If there's anything else, if we're missing, definitely let us know. And I think that unless anyone else has any other questions that they can think of, again, I think I speak for us and SOS. If you need to reach out to us, or if you ever have any questions or needs after this, I'm sure Brendan can provide our contact info.
Yeah. So please, and if you want to include that contact info in your last slides that you have, it'll be there for the attendees, and so certainly I'll get that out, and I'll make sure I copy you all on that so they can have your emails if that's okay with you.
Perfect.
Good, wonderful.
Sard came back real quick. The EU Carnet was validated by CBP on import, but never valid. Oh, okay. So it was stamped into the U.S., but then it wasn't validated on the re-export. Okay, so at that point, more than likely, you're going to have a claim be filed by U.S. Customs because they have record of the goods coming into the U.S. but not out of the U.S. So you're going to have to work with the claims representative for that EU-issued Carnet on how they're going to prove that the goods did in fact leave the U.S. in time, nor was it validated in Greenland as it stayed on the water. That's going to be a tricky one, and I would definitely, I can get you hooked up with my claims department, but you're definitely going to want to talk to the issuing authority of that Carnet in their claims department, since it is a Greenland issued Carnet.
Yeah, I would say you could, this sounds like you could talk about this more maybe in a follow-up call right afterwards. I would recommend that because there's right. It sounds like he or she has a lot of questions on this, and certainly, you're in touch with the right people here who are passionate about it. So I would just like to say that, and certainly, feel free to do that, and then we'll just wrap up here and get the recording out to people as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having us. Thank you to SOS. Thank you to everybody.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you to
guys.
SOS.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Carnet Boomerang, and we appreciate it all. It was very informative.
Hey, guys.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Stay well, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Thank you.